Alright guys, welcome back to your 37th C++ tutorial, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you guys a really easy way to print out multi-dimensional arrays. So let's go ahead, and first thing we need to do is create a multi-dimensional array. Go ahead and name it Bertha, and Bertha can be 2 rows by 3 columns, same as before. So now what we need to do is go ahead and make an array of arrays. So the first thing I do is put my 2 arrays in there, separated with the comma. So now we have 2 arrays, which would be 2 rows, and now put 3 values in each, like we'll just put 1, 2, and 3 in the first one, and 7, 8, and 9 in the second one. So now we have an array called Bertha that has 2 rows and 3 values in each row. So it's basically a table that's 2 by 3. So in order to print this out, what we need to do first is we need to loop through each row one by one. We're going to loop through the first row, and then we're going to loop through the second row. So let's go ahead and make a for loop, and well, we might as well name this row, and of course it always starts at 0 because the 0th index is the first element in your array. So row 0, and the second one is row is less than 2. So what this is going to do when we put row plus plus is it's going to go from 0 to 1. So row 0, then row 1. It's not going to go row 2 because, of course, 2 is not less than 2. So now we're looping through each row one at a time. And now, of course, you guys can probably guess what I'm going to do next. We need to loop through each column or each element in the row. So now, in order to do that, go ahead and make another for loop, and this is going to look really familiar. There we go. Int column, make sure I spelled it right. This one starts at 0 as well. Again, all arrays start at 0, even if they're inside another array. Column is less than 3 because that's how many columns you have. You basically write the maximum, the number of rows and the number of columns right there. Simple enough. You know what? That kind of looks like a heart. That's kind of cute. Anyways, moving on. Column plus plus. So now what we're doing is this. We're looping through each row one by one. The first time it loops through row 1, it's going to loop through each of those elements, 1, 2, and 3. And then it's going to loop through row 2, and then it's going to loop through each of those elements, 7, 8, and 9. So after we get through looping through each column, we want to move to the next line, cout end line, because again each row is on a different line, so that's why when we're done looping through the last element in the row, we want to move to the next line. So now we can just go ahead and print it out on the screen, like cout Bertha was her name, and you put the row number, which would be this, 0 or 1, and then you put the column number, which is going to be some value 0 to 2. And that would be these values right here. So let's go ahead and make sure you don't write end line on, actually what we do need to do though is add a space there. But make sure you don't write end line on this line right here, because these are your column values. You don't want every single one of these numbers to go on a new line. You only want it to go to a new line after you're done looping through the last element in that column. So let's go ahead and print it, make sure I didn't forget any semicolons, which I did somewhere, and let me see what's wrong. Oh, I see. What I did here is I put a come on, highlight, put a comma instead of a semicolon. So now let me check, make sure to run it again, and there we go. In our first row it printed out 1, 2, 3, and in our second row it printed out 7, 8, 9. So this is a perfect way to visually see multi-dimensional arrays. So pretty cool, huh? So again, one last time, here's what we did. I'll just leave this down here. We made an array that was 2 by 3, and which that means is it was an array consisting of 2 different arrays with 3 values each, and what that means is we basically made a table that was 2 rows by 3 columns, as we can see right here. The first thing we needed to do is loop through each row. Loop through this row, the first one, and then loop through the second one, and we did that by writing row 0, rows less than 2, yada yada yada, all that fun stuff. You basically, the only thing you need to worry about is make sure this value right here is the same as this value right here. So we said, alright, for each row we loop through, we want to loop through each one of the elements one at a time. So that's why we wrote start with 0, 1, 2, one at a time. And why we had this little spacer right here is because if we didn't have that, it would put 1, 2, 3 real close together. So what it did is it basically printed out a row, one element at a time, and then when it was done, it said C out end line, and that's why it jumped to this next line and printed out 7, 8, 9. And it did that until it was done printing out all the rows, and then it just ended. So that is how you print out a basic multi-dimensional array. Again, of course, this is a whole lot to see visually. It's a whole lot better looking at than this right here. So that is why you actually use this quite a bit whenever you're programming. So that's all I have for you guys for this tutorial. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you understand how to print out a multi-dimensional array now, because we're going to be done talking about arrays for now. In the next tutorial, I think I'm going to be covering something called vectors, which is kind of like an array, but it's a little bit different. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. If you have any questions, check out my website, and I'll see you in the next video.